Hi there, welcome to the Cardano session. So, if you have been in the previous two sessions I did just now, you've heard me doing a lot of intro, so I'll go straight into the chart. So, back to the weekly. We'll do something interesting for the daily later on. So, I hope you enjoyed it in the previous two sessions, so I'll add this to the other crypto like altcoins or even Bitcoin as well. Currently, basically we talk about this. It's a post-distribution cycle period. I previously tagged a point here saying it's potentially a preliminary support, that PS, not PlayStation. So here we see the last PS back in similar time, May, June time, back to, well, actually 3 years ago now, 2022. So here's the thing, if it really is PS, first I talk about if it is really PS. If not PS, then I'll cover afterwards. So if it is, then it's normal for at a certain point before the selling climax that there is a little bit of rebound. We see that green candle over there, right? So we have a little bit of green over here, but then the red is coming out when, it's still early to say it's going to be a red because there's still 6 days and 8 hours left for this week's candle. So it can still come up and test this resistance line, this white resistance line at around $6.40 roughly. However, what I want to point out is, if it's this first scenario, we are going to expect some downward action, like we're going to see the selling climax. However, if it isn't, if it's a second scenario, what's the second scenario? That means this is not a PS. This is just another sign of weakness that can happen as well. If that's the case, then we would see another LPSY. So let's say if it is the second scenario, then if the price goes up and like successfully tested and go through the resistance line, the white line, and find another last point of supply, that's scenario 2, and then it can develop further afterwards. So it can wiggle along this line as long as it wants to before it comes down. But you know, like when this happens, when price comes down, people tend to panic and sell way quicker than like somewhere around here. So let's see how that would develop. So that's the big picture in terms of resistance. If it does breaks the first one, the second resistance will be at around 86 cents. That's the level of the automatic reaction after the buying climax. Support line, interestingly, we haven't drawn one, but here should be the first support line. So it's not the center line, so to say, of the white box. I can drag it here, so it's pretty much the center line now. So center line doesn't have to cut the box in half. It's basically where we find a lot of points, or maybe the most points touching this line within the box. So we've got a bunch here, a tip here, a bunch here, another bunch here, here, and here as well. So that's pretty frequent in terms of longer timeline. I'll make this white over here, and you already see the price, right? So that's around 42 cents roughly. That's our immediate support line. If the price really comes down to test it, that's the point. Second support before the ultimate one at the bottom, obviously it would be somewhere around here. This time I'll make this green, or well, actually let's do yellow. There's a warning that it's coming down to be tested. So what I want to do is just set it on the current interval, just quickly check. Okay, that's still fine. Here, second support, 31 cents roughly. Usually it has a range. These are the extremes. It can still happen, but it's far from where we are now, so we'll cover it later on if it does come down. So that's the big picture. The daily. Here, this downward trend is still continuing, basically. You see this coming all the way, following this tunnel, right? This tube. So if nothing particularly good about Cardano is coming out, no good news, no big news about the industry, maybe it will edge a little bit to the, let's say, no good and bad towards here. However, if the sentiments change to the downside, then it will continue to follow this trend until it tests this blue support line at around 41 cents. So we kind of talked about it, this line earlier on in this weekly chart. That's the white line over here. On the daily, we've drawn it previously. So interesting part comes. I mentioned in the previous session, but if you haven't watched the earlier two, somebody left a comment asking whether I can do Wyckoff on the lower level, like more frequent timeline other than the weekly, even though I prefer to look at it from the macro, the weekly perspective with less noise more. So let's try to do it here. So if I strip the chart, if we look at here, that's March 2024, right? March 2024 was this sign of strength kind of thing. So you can say this looks like another mini distribution cycle. You can treat it that way, but I look at it, I thought it's still an accumulation, still within accumulation, so I tag it like this. But you can obviously change it and say, okay, this was actually a sign of strength. This was the, I don't want to multiply that line, that was the last point of supply and back up, actually. And then you can say, oh, that's the buying climax, and this, that's totally fine, and that was another mini accumulation cycle. That's why initially I was tagging the other way, because it looks to me that's supposed to be, that's pretty rapid. Okay, back to the point. March 20, 2024 was actually the peak over here. So you can say that's a distribution cycle of a tiny one. And then what's, I don't want to say Cardano. Let's say in the daily chart we've got this buying climax. It takes a little bit of a while to update. Let's say if that's the case and we have this accumulation period here before we reach this point, there's another buying climax over here. And let's say if this holds true and we have gone through another accumulation here, let's say if this was another buying climax here. So you can see, right? So this was one, let me move the chart because of the disclaimer. So here we've got one distribution cycle in terms of daily chart, a bit of accumulation cycle over here, and then another quick distribution. And now what we're seeing is this accumulation period. So if we try to play with this mini Wyckoff pattern, let's say this is the selling climax, and we had an automatic rally and a second test. Let's say if this is the sign of strength, and now it's seeking a point lower than the second test or somewhat close to the second test, assuming there's another test, or you can call it spring, whatever, but it's actually very close to this here, so I just put a test. If this is true, like this mini Wyckoff pattern on the daily chart, then what would happen after this accumulation cycle may be another leg upwards. So it's very tricky if we want to do it, but also because if I look at it now, I see something else. So this is the option 1, right? Pattern 2 or option 2 is this wasn't the thing, this was actually the sign of strength. What happened here was actually the PSY, preliminary supply, and over here we already gone through the buying climax, and this is obviously, let's say, an LPSY. So if we see like lower buying climax, lower buying climax, lower buying climax within this daily more frequent chart, this LPSY over here, obviously this has now become the new selling climax, and we've got a new automatic rally. So the price may come down for a second test and may show a sign of strength, and eventually maybe giving us a little new buying climax. So that's the thing. That can be a possibility when I look at this daily chart. So you see, I have shown you how I would draw a Wyckoff pattern, or how I look at a Wyckoff pattern and draw the text on the daily chart, but it becomes very, very busy. And one thing not to forget is the daily chart is or sits under this bigger Wyckoff chart, or like Wyckoff pattern. If we're still within this distribution pattern and we are at the late stage, whatever happening in the daily chart, even though, let's say I name this over here, in the daily chart I probably named this as a buying climax, right? So this was May, early May. So if we go to the daily chart, early May, I named this a buying climax, right? So that's the, I don't want this, so yeah, that's where I put it. Oh, it's actually this one that populates to the lower level. So this buying climax on the daily chart is the same one in here as an LPSY. So the point is, when we play with Wyckoff, if we do it on a daily chart, don't forget about the macro picture, because this is coming down. Even though that's a buying climax in terms of the daily chart, don't get carried away thinking the price, oh, would there be an upthrust and an upthrust of the distribution? Go back to check the weekly chart to see what's happening if you are really thinking that way. So that's the tricky part if we are trying to play with this on a lower level timeline. You can draw something out of it, but pay attention to the bigger picture. So that's for Cardano for now.